Well, this morning we're going to begin a 4-week series in the 5th chapter of the Gospel of John. The video clip that you just watched was taken from the motion picture, The Gospel of John, same total, or by the same name. I love just watching the video as opposed to just listening to me read the scripture passage. And I particularly like this portrayal because it's word for word. It literally follows the scriptural text word for word. So you can trust it. This is good stuff. Now they kind of fill in the blank as to how things are being said, but it's very accurate to the scriptural text. And what we just saw this morning was John 15, 1 through 15. I'm sorry, John 5, 1 through 15. The reenactment of the story of the man who was healed by Jesus by the pool of Bethesda. And some of you remember, I actually preached on this particular passage as part of a different message series years ago, way back at the other building. And so if there are bits and pieces of this text that sound familiar, it's because we're revisiting some familiar material. And for those of you who remember everything I ever preach, word for word, even like years later, I don't even remember it. So I was like, oh yeah, I think I did actually preach on this passage. Well, here's some background information that may be helpful for you to understand what's happening in the scene a little bit better. The Bethesda pool was this beautiful Greco-Roman bathing pool that was located near one of the major commercial entrances to the city of Jerusalem. And it was not only a popular tourist attraction, so to speak, but it was also a very popular place for worshipers who entered through this gate, the sheep gate. They would stop by there on their way to the temple because it was right there between the two. And the worshipers would stop there to get cleaned up, to get refreshed before going to worship at the temple. But beyond that, the Bethesda pool had also become an ideal gathering place for the sick and the infirm. It was kind of like the first century equivalent of a hospital because the covered porches, which were portrayed well in the movie, and you can see here in this painting, the covered porches provide an excellent place for the sick just to lie in the shade, protection from the midday sun. And plus, as an added benefit, the pool's proximity, to the temple and its location on this path from the main gate to the temple made it a perfect place to beg, a perfect place to ask for alms. And so it was a very crowded part of Jerusalem. But there was another reason why the sick and the infirm would set up their camp of sick beds around the Bethesda pool. It was held that on occasion, an angel from the Lord would stir the waters with its wings. And the first invalid, the first sick person, it was held, who entered into the waters after this mystical stirring, so to speak, would be completely healed of their disease. Now, there are differing opinions among Bible scholars who like to argue about such things. There's differing opinions whether this mystical healing activity in the waters of the Bethesda pool was something of an urban legend at the time, or if it was actually this supernatural mercy. If it was actually a supernatural grace from the hand of the Lord, dispensed through an angel's wing. But whether it's an urban legend or not, it's not difficult to imagine that the sick and the infirm, those who had parked their sick beds around the pool, it's not hard to imagine that they had these very eager expectations that whenever they saw some sort of ripple in the water, that they were going to do everything to get in that water and get healed. And you can just easily imagine that day after day they were just fixed on the water to see if there was just anything happening there. And it's not hard to imagine that every now and again you would hear a shout and there'd be a commotion among the sick, a commotion among the crowd, and you'd look and you'd see somebody just sort of flailing themselves as quickly as they could into the water, and there'd be others who are following and they're elbowing each other out to try to get to the water. And then an uncharacteristic hush of the normal crowd around the Bethesda pool a hush would fall over the noise uncharacteristically, and hundreds of eyes would be watching to see what happened. And perhaps every now and again the crowd would marvel as an invalid walks away completely healed of something that had been, dragging them down for a long time. Or it's not hard to imagine that often, someone saw an apparent mystical stirring in the waters. And again, a commotion, flailing bodies trying to get in the water, and then a disappointed person getting out of the water because all it was a little movement of the wind or just a trick of the eyes, just from staring at the water, hoping for too long. And the would-be, person to be healed drags themselves back out of the pool, disappointed and frustrated, broken and despairing. So we're told then, that's kind of the setup, the backdrop between the Bethesda pool. And we're told in this scripture passage that waiting there beside the waters was a man who had been sick nearly 38 years, we're told. And with what, we're actually not told. We kind of draw the conclusion from reading the text and from watching the movie that he was lame, but we're actually not told with what he was sick. We only know that he was ill for 38 years. And I personally like the fact that we're not told what his particular flavor of brokenness was, because it makes it easier for us to recognize something of ourselves in him. See, his unknown illness gives us freedom and permission to think about ways that we've been broken, to think about ways that we are broken, and maybe, like him, ways that we've been broken for a very long time. So maybe for some of us, it's been a long-term illness, some sort of chronic disease or some sort of chronic pain. Some of you might be able to recognize in yourself that sort of struggle. Maybe for some of us, it's chronic heart pain. It's an open bleeding wound from abuse or abandonment or betrayal, a heart wound that now, maybe even years after the fact, just still aches as if it happened only yesterday. Maybe for some, your sick bed of brokenness is, the heart pain of just disappointed dreams, unrealized dreams, or dashed dreams. Some of us can identify with that. Maybe for some, the area of brokenness is long-standing battle with an area of sin. Anger that you just can't get up off that mat of anger or rage or addiction. Maybe it's a pornography addiction, a lust addiction. For some of you, maybe it's cutting or binging or purging or bitterness or hatred or judgmentalism or gossip or unforgiveness. There is some sickbed of sin that you just can't get off, and perhaps for a very long time. Maybe for some, the area of brokenness is brokenness in our thoughts, a lifelong battle with just hopelessness. You're just crippled with depression, crippled with disappointment. You're just crippled with self-hatred. That might be a kind of brokenness that we can have freedom to recognize, in the man of John 15. And then maybe lastly, for some of you, your illness is a lifelong battle with broken relationships. In the wake of your life, you look back and it's just a scarred landscape of blown up relationships. Maybe it's financial brokenness. You just can't, get up off the mat of being broke. Not just broken, but broke. Well, whatever it may be, many of us, like the man sitting near the Bethesda pool, we're living out our lives on some sickbed, some area of brokenness, and brokenness perhaps that we've been battling for just too long. For too long. And so I just invite you in this moment, can you think of an area in your life, an area of brokenness that you've just been living with for too long, an area of pain? I think that many of us might be able to also identify with our friend's hope that someday something's going to change, right? There's going to be some sort of mystical, angelic stirring in the waters around us, a mystical stirring of some sort that will set us free from this pain, this condition in which we've been imprisoned for too long. And I think many of us might be able to bring into focus some of our expectations of what that mystical stirring might look like. Maybe for some of us, that mystical stirring will take the form of some sort of breakthrough medication. You have a chronic disease, and there's just nothing that doctors have been able to do for you. And the hope is someday, some sort of mystical medicinal stirring is going to set you free. Maybe for some of you, the mystical stirring will take the form of a new job, a new house, a new zip code, a new church, a new husband, a new wife, a new bed partner, a new something, a new anything. Maybe for some of you, the mystical stirring on which your expectations are so earnestly fixed, is actually that the hand of God will break through, that there will be a supernatural healing that comes from the hand of God. Whatever our expectation is for what it is that's going to take our pain away, for whatever it is that's going to put our broken parts back together again, I think we all in some way might be able to recognize something of ourselves in this man sitting near the waters of the Bethesda pool, living out our lives on some sickbed of long-standing brokenness and pain, waiting for something to happen. Waiting for something to change, waiting for someone to change, waiting for some sort of mystical movement of the elements around us that will bring about the pain relief that we so desperately want. And it's to this man in John 5, it's to us, and it's to this condition, and it's to this frame of mind that Jesus asks a very penetrating question. Do you want to get well? Do you want to get well? Now, I think many of us, would have expected that the man would have quickly answered, for real, do I want to get well? Duh. What a totally stupid question, Jesus. Why would you even ask me that? Of course, I don't like this, and of course, I would rather that it changed. And that might be the kind of knee-jerk reaction that we would offer Jesus to if he asks us, do you want to get well? Do you want to be free of the sickbed of brokenness upon which you've grown so, perhaps, comfortable? Too comfortable, maybe, after so long. And I imagine that Jesus asked the same question, after staring down our friends, what a stupid question look. I just imagine Jesus stared that down, and then after a very long, awkward pause, I think he actually asked it again. Do you want to get well? So as you think about maybe some long-standing area of pain in your life, just let Jesus' question linger over your heart and mind right now. Do you really want to get well? Do you want to get well? Do you really want your body to get well? Do you really want your mind to get well? Do you want your emotions? Do you want your attitudes? Do you really want your pet sins to get well? Do you want your sharp tongue to get well? Really? Do you want your addiction to get well? Do you really want your finances to get well? Do you really want your relationships to get well? Do you really want your marriage to get well? Do you really want your bitterness to get well? Fill in the blank. Do you really want to get well? And when confronted with Jesus' penetrating question, our friend by the pool of Bethesda finally offered an honest answer. In verse 7, the sick man answered Jesus, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. But while I am coming, another steps down before me." And so our friend's honest answer to Jesus' question, "Do you want to get well?" highlights for us two reasons why we may get stuck on our sick beds of pain. All right? Two reasons why we get stuck in a cycle of actually perpetuating our own pain. All right? The first way we may perpetuate our own pain is through blame. It's through blame. And we can get stuck in our brokenness just by becoming focused on pointing our finger at the one who caused our pain rather than focusing on the one who can heal our pain. Do you understand that? Blame. You can hear blame in our friend's answer. Jesus says, "Do you want to get well?" "Well, sir, I have no one." Okay. Do you want to get well? "Well, whenever I try, somebody else steps into the water first and steals my healing." Okay. Do you want to get well? "Well, I would if so-and-so would just such and such." Well, do you want to get well? "Well, I could if my dad hadn't." No, do you want to get well? "Well, if my mom only would have." Do you want to get well? "If only my friends would, ... Okay, I'm asking you a question here. Do you want to get well? "Well, I would if my wife would only." "I would if my kids would, ... I would if my boss, ... Do you want to get well? "Well, I would if so-and-so would just own up to." Do you want to get well? "Well, I would if God would have." Do you really want to get well? "Well, I would if," fill in the blank. Fill in the blank. Who or what is it at the other end of that finger of blame for that area of long-standing brokenness? Who's on the other end of that finger? Is there someone or something that in your mind is responsible for keeping you on a sick bed of brokenness? Who or what in your mind is standing in the way as your excuse between your sick bed and the healing waters of Jesus' mercy? Now, if you can identify that there is some person or something that you hold as the reason why you can't get better, some of you are in pain because somebody did, in fact, do you over, right? They hurt you. They did hurt you. And so it's not that the who's to blame question isn't ultimately an important question. Jesus will ultimately address that question. You understand? I'm talking to those of you who have been on the receiving end of somebody else's sin. But the important thing for you to notice right now is that the question Jesus asks is not who's to blame. The question Jesus is asking you to answer right now is, do you want to get well? That's the important question. He'll deal with the other question. He will. Someday. He will. But the important question now is, do you really want to get well? "Well, no, Jesus, I would just rather hang out in the vicinity of healing waters. And I would just rather live my life on my bed of self-pity and my sick bed of blame, licking my open wounds with my blaming tongue. That's what I want." We can actually participate in perpetuating our own pain just by getting focused on blame. Don't do that. So there's a second way that we may participate in perpetuating our own pain. That's through isolation. Through isolation. You can hear this sickbed of isolation in the opening words of our friend's answer to Jesus' question. Do you want to get well? Well, sir, I have no one. I have no one. I don't know if that sounds familiar. It sounds very familiar to me. And I'd have to say, in my experience, not only pastorally, but personally, that I frequently see isolation as one of the primary reasons why people get stuck in areas of long-standing pain. It's isolation. Do you want to get well? Well, sir, I have no one. No, do you want to get well? Are you growing spiritually? Or are you just sort of still limping along? Well, I have no one. Or how are you doing in that area of forgiveness? Well, there's no one. Right? How are you doing with that area that you've been battling in your life? Well, nobody ever. Right? If you're habitually choosing to isolate yourself from meaningful relational connection in the community of Christ, you are depriving yourself of one of God's primary means to heal you and to grow you up in the Christian life. If you're habitually choosing to isolate yourself from meaningful relational connection in the community of Christ, you are participating. You are participating in perpetuating pain in your life. We all need to be meaningfully connected with other saints so that they can help us get off our sick beds and bring us to the healing waters of Jesus. We all need that. Because we're all crippled in some way, There is for all of us maybe ways in which there's impediments in our lives in getting to Jesus. And we need others to lift us and carry us to the healing waters of Jesus. But we can get stuck in isolation and miss out on the healing touch of Jesus. And actually, we can get stuck in this vicious cycle then between isolation and blame. We isolate ourselves and then we blame others, and then the more we blame others, the more we isolate ourselves, the more we blame. You see how that cycle works? Yeah, and so we can perpetuate this cycle to our own detriment. All right, so back to our story. Isolation and blame. Very unhelpful choices that some of us may be making. So back in our story, like us, our friend has some area of long-standing pain. He's waiting for somebody around him, something around him to mystically stir the circumstances so that healing can happen in his life. But it never comes for him because, frankly, he's blaming it. It's somebody else's fault. I'm not getting healed. And besides, I don't have anybody to help me. Isolation. And it's to this condition, and it's to this life orientation, it's to this attitude of his, and maybe of ours as well, that Jesus says this, verse 8, stand up, pick up your mat and walk. Stand up, pick your mat, and walk. And I just want to give you two take-homes from these words of Jesus that may address your particular area of long-standing pain. First of all, here's the first point to contemplate, that the healing power for your particular area of pain and brokenness, it's in the command of Jesus. And this is really just the corollary to what we've been talking about in isolation and pain. Call upon the powerful healing command of Jesus. In other words, don't get stuck on a sick bed of brokenness by blaming, by calling out to somebody else to own what they did to you before you can be healed, but rather call upon the powerful healing command of Jesus. Don't get stuck on a sickbed of brokenness by calling upon isolation to somehow heal you, so that you can lick your words in the absence of other people who you never know might hurt you even more. So better safe to isolate yourself, right? So I'm going to lick my wounds all by myself. Don't call upon isolation as your healer. Rather, surround yourself in a community of saints who will stand with you in calling upon the powerful healing command of Jesus, who will help you stand in the gap between your sick bed of pain and the healing waters of Jesus. Right? That's the first point. The healing is in the powerful command of Jesus, so call upon him if you really want to get well. All right? Now we're going to build on this. This is the second take-home for you this morning. Jesus' powerful healing command, listen to this, Jesus' powerful healing command may call upon you to participate in your own healing. You may need to make some healing choices. I mean, I don't know if you noticed the words of Jesus' powerful healing command. He said to the man, stand up, take your mat, and walk. It's interesting to me that in this particular context, in this particular situation of this man's condition and in this man's attitude, this man's life orientation, that Jesus did not say, be healed. Jesus did not say, you are healed. Jesus' sentence did not even contain the word healed. Did you notice that? He said to the man, you get up. You get off your sick bed. Pack it up, put it away, and get going. You know, there's a difference in there. Get up. See, there may be times, and listen to this carefully. This is a parenthetical aside. Don't make a formula out of this. Because we get ourselves in trouble when we try to make formulas out of things. And so, we like to make a formula out of God's healing touch. And so you might leave here this morning and you're praying for somebody to be healed and be like, okay, you're not getting healed. Well, who are you blaming? Is there somebody you're blaming in your life? Because that's what John 15 says. You're not getting healed because you're blaming. All right, see how we made it a formula? All right, you're isolated. That's why you're not getting healed. All right. You're not getting healed because you're not cooperating with what Jesus commanded you to do. All right, we make formulas like that because formulas put us in control, and we like to be in control because we figure, we just do the little steps of the rain dance. We pull the lever, and boop, we get our miracle. God does what we tell him to do because we did the dance. We did the steps. You know what I'm saying? So don't make a formula out of this. I'm only trying to focus on the fact that in this particular situation, for this particular man, in his condition of blame and isolation, his healing was in Jesus' command to get up. See, there may be times when we need to make healing choices in order to cooperate with Jesus' healing command. There may be times when we're in a posture of incessantly waiting for Jesus to speak the healing word, when in fact Jesus already spoke the healing word into the step of obedience that he's commanding us to take. Jesus, I'm waiting for you to heal my bitterness before I get up and move towards that person. To which Jesus says, no, I've already spoken healing for your bitterness into your step of moving towards that person. You see that? Oh, no, Jesus, you heal my bitterness first, then I'll move towards that person. No, you move towards that person, and you'll find that I've already healed your bitterness. See the difference? All right? Jesus, I'm waiting for you to heal my feelings for my spouse before I move towards my spouse. Jesus says, no, I've actually already spoken the healing word for your marriage into your step of obedience. You know, for you to get off your sick bed of discontent, if you just take the step of getting off your sickbed of unhappiness, your sickbed of disappointment, whatever it is that you've grown so comfortable on, the healing for the feelings for your spouse is in your obedience to my command to get up and move towards your spouse. No, Jesus, you heal my feelings and then I'll move. Jesus says, no, you move first and you'll find that you've already been healed. See, we learn from this episode in John 5 that there may be times when Jesus says to us, I've already spoken the powerful healing word. I've already spoken it. Quit waiting for me to do something. I'm actually waiting for you to do something. Get up already. Put away the sick bed on which you've become so comfortable. Get off this sick bed that you are just perpetually living your life out upon. Get off this sick bed that, you feel so right on. You are so right, aren't you, on your sick bed? Get up already. Pick it up and get going. You get going. All right. A third kind of healing choice that we need to make in order to continue walking. I haven't been numbering anything. Third choice, are any of you saying, what was the first and second? I'm finding myself saying, did I have a first and second? The next healing choice, point C. Another kind of healing choice that we may need to make in order to continue walking in Jesus' powerful healing command is this. In verse 14, and I love this, after the man had been healed by Jesus, he's in the temple, he's being interrogated by the religious hypocrites and the Pharisees. And they're asking him, who healed you? And I love this because it tells us so much about Jesus, but it's another sermon for another time. The man realized, I don't know. I don't even know his name. Think about that. Jesus healed the guy, and the guy didn't even know Jesus' name. I think a lot of us, our Jesuses wouldn't do that. Yeah, right? He wouldn't do that. They need to hear a good gospel message before Jesus is going to heal them. Jesus, he didn't even know his name. Who healed you? I have no idea who he is. All right, that's another sermon. I'm sorry, that's free. So we're told in verse 14, after the guy realizes, I don't even know who healed me. Verse 14, so afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and told him, now you are well. So, stop sinning. Or something worse may even happen to you. Stop sinning. Stop sinning. Stop sinning. Sometimes the healing choice we need to make to continue in Jesus' powerful command is to stop sinning or something worse is going to happen to us. Well, here's another aside. This is absolutely free. I think a lot of us don't have a Jesus who would have done this either. We have a Jesus who would have at the pool said, do you want to get well? The guy would have said, yes. And Jesus would have said, okay, stop sinning. And then I'll think about healing you, maybe. We'll see. We'll see if you walk in it for very long. You know what I'm saying? He didn't stop sinning. And he didn't even know Jesus' name, and Jesus healed him anyway. I love that. Jesus is so careless with his grace. He is so careless. But that's not my point. My point is stop sinning. And don't make this a formula either, right? But in this particular instance, whatever the man's condition was, it was somehow connected to sin. And we're going to see as we continue through the book of John that we can't formulate this, formalize it, make it into a formula, because Jesus addresses the wrongness of that formula. All right, we'll see that in a couple chapters. All right. But I keep losing myself. What's the point? Sometimes the healing choice we do need to make is to stop sinning. Sometimes we are, in fact, perpetuating the pain of longstanding brokenness just through commitment to embrace an area of sin in our lives. And Jesus' command to us is pretty straightforward. Well, stop doing that. Stop doing that, or something else is going to happen to you that's even worse. And this is not difficult to understand. Let me give you an example to see how this plays itself out. Let's say that Jesus does, in fact, speak a powerful healing word for the brokenness and the pain in your marriage. And he speaks that healing word into your step of obedience of moving towards your spouse, of getting off your sickbed of resentment and disappointment and discontentment with your wife or your husband. You take a step and you find, wow, and your marriage enters into this season of wholeness. But imagine this. What if you cave in again to your sin of discontent, or your sin of bitterness or resentment or forgiveness? Do you know, maybe from experience, what is the condition of your marriage going to be comparatively when you cycle back into your sin? Did the question make sense? No, it did? You just don't want to answer? Is it going to seem worse? You get healed of my bitterness towards my spouse. I'm in love again with my spouse, but I cycle back into, I resent them so much. It's going to be worse the next time around. Stop sinning, Jesus said, or the condition is going to grow even worse. And so in order for us to continue our healing, we need to stop sinning. We need to stop cycling back into that pet sin. Now, and you need to understand that Jesus' words here, it's not a command to sinless perfection, right? It's not stop sinning, period, or you're going to get sick. Because if that's what Jesus' command was, we're all doomed to get really sick. Right? It wasn't a command to sinless perspective. Jesus is saying to this man, he's saying to us, listen, you can choose to walk in my healing, or you can choose to keep rehearsing your sin. But you can't choose both. You can't choose both my healing and your sin. So if you want to walk in my healing, you've got to let go of your pet sin. You've got to quit nursing your bitterness, or it's going to keep getting worse. You've got to quit nursing your discontent. You've got to quit revisiting your sinful unforgiveness. You have to quit rehearsing your resentment. You need to stop sinning, or it's just going to get worse. Make sense? So we can cooperate with Jesus' healing touch, by getting off the sickbed of this pet sin that we like so much, that is actually making our condition worse. All right, I'm going to stop there. For some of us, the healing is in, getting off the blame, getting in the community of saints and getting unisolated and putting ourselves in a place where people can help bring us to the waters of Jesus' healing touch. And we need to quit focusing on that person who's to blame and focus on the person who has the healing in his touch. And we need to make healing choices to cooperate with Jesus' command to get up off that sick bed.